What if the greatest threat to your faith isn't rebellion, but comfort? Not walking away from God, not denying Him publicly, but slowly drifting into something that feels safe, familiar, and spiritually neutral. There is a word Jesus used that should unsettle every believer who hears it. Lukewarm. Not cold, not hot, lukewarm. And what makes it dangerous is that lukewarm faith rarely feels alarming. It feels normal. It blends into routine. It attends church. It knows the language. It posts the verse. It agrees with truth. But something underneath is no longer burning. The danger of lukewarm faith is not obvious sin. It is subtle indifference. It is the slow cooling of conviction. And the most concerning part, you can be lukewarm and not realize it. You can sincerely believe you're fine because nothing looks dramatically wrong. That is why self-examination matters, not condemnation, not paranoia, but clarity, because what you don't confront, you slowly become. The first sign you may be spiritually lukewarm is that your faith has become convenient. You follow God when it fits your schedule. You pray when it's comfortable. You obey when it doesn't cost you. But when faith demands sacrifice, silence becomes easier. Lukewarm faith negotiates obedience. It calculates the social cost. It avoids discomfort. It wants the benefits of belief without the burden of surrender. But real devotion has weight. It reshapes priorities. It disrupts comfort zones. If your faith has never required you to step outside convenience, it may have quietly settled into neutrality. The second sign is that conviction no longer moves you. There was a time when certain compromises would have deeply bothered you. Certain habits would have felt incompatible with who you were becoming. But now, the tension has faded, not because you overcame temptation, but because you adjusted your standards. Lukewarm faith doesn't always reject truth. It lowers sensitivity to it. When exposure to compromise becomes constant, conviction dulls. You begin to justify what you once resisted. And the more you rationalize, the quieter your conscience becomes. Spiritual temperature drops gradually, not dramatically. The third sign is that your spiritual life is almost entirely external. You participate publicly. You engage socially. You know how to speak the right phrases. But in private, your connection with God feels distant or mechanical. Lukewarm faith thrives in appearance. It values being seen as faithful more than actually being transformed. It substitutes image for intimacy. And because the exterior still looks intact, the interior drift goes unnoticed. But faith was never meant to be sustained by performance. It was meant to be rooted in relationship. When no one is watching, who are you becoming? The fourth sign is spiritual apathy. You no longer feel urgency about growth. You are not hostile toward God. You are just not hungry. You don't resist Him. You simply don't pursue Him. Passion has been replaced by passivity, and apathy is more dangerous than struggle. Struggle at least acknowledges tension. Apathy erases it. When you stop asking deeper questions, stop seeking deeper understanding, stop desiring deeper transformation, you begin coasting spiritually. And coasting always moves downhill. The fifth sign is that you rely more on feelings than on commitment. When worship feels emotional, you feel close to God. When circumstances improve, you feel grateful. But when emotions dip, your spiritual rhythm collapses. Lukewarm faith is unstable because it is anchored in sensation rather than decision. Mature faith continues even when feelings fluctuate. It chooses consistency over inspiration. It understands that devotion is not sustained by emotional highs alone. Now here is the uncomfortable reality. Lukewarm faith rarely announces itself. It does not arrive with rebellion. It arrives with distraction. It grows through busyness, through routine, through small compromises that seem harmless at first. You do not wake up one day far from God. You drift there gradually, degree by degree. Why does this matter so much? Because indifference slowly reshapes desire. What you tolerate, you normalize. What you normalize, you stop questioning. And what you stop questioning begins shaping you. Lukewarm faith convinces you that stability equals health. But spiritual health is not measured by the absence of crisis. It is measured by the presence of hunger. There is something sobering about the way Jesus spoke about lukewarmness. He did not say he was frustrated. He said it made him want to spit it out. That imagery is strong for a reason. Lukewarm water is neither refreshing nor healing. It serves no distinct purpose. And that is the danger. Lukewarm faith blends in. It avoids extremes. It never risks bold obedience or radical trust. It chooses safe spirituality. But faith was never meant to be safe. The good news is this: recognizing lukewarmness is not a sentence. It is an invitation. Awareness is the first step toward renewal. You cannot reignite what you refuse to acknowledge. But once you see it, you can respond. So how does lukewarmness begin? Often through subtle priority shifts. God moves from center to accessory, from foundation to background. You still believe, you still agree, but He no longer shapes daily decisions. Other ambitions quietly take primary focus. Success, security, approval. None of these are inherently wrong. But when they outrank devotion, spiritual warmth fades. Another contributor is comparison. When you measure your faith against those who appear less committed, you feel secure. You think, at least I'm not like that. But comparison creates false comfort. The standard is not other people's inconsistency. The standard is wholehearted devotion. And wholehearted devotion cannot be evaluated by observing someone else's weakness. Comfort also feeds lukewarmness. When life is stable, urgency fades. Crisis often drives people toward prayer. But stability can lull people into complacency. When nothing feels threatened, pursuit feels optional. Yet the absence of external pressure does not eliminate internal drift. There is also the danger of overexposure without application. Listening to sermons, watching spiritual content, reading verses, but rarely implementing change. Information without transformation leads to stagnation. You feel spiritually engaged because you are consuming content. But consumption is not the same as obedience. Lukewarm faith often confuses inspiration with action. Let's be honest, no one intends to become lukewarm. It happens slowly, through neglect rather than defiance, through delay rather than denial, through subtle compromise rather than dramatic rejection. But here is the turning point. You can choose differently. If your faith has become convenient, choose costly obedience in one area. If conviction has dulled, re-expose yourself to truth without defensiveness. If your spiritual life is external, rebuild private intimacy. If apathy has settled in, pursue growth intentionally rather than waiting for motivation. If feelings dominate your commitment, anchor yourself in disciplined consistency. Renewal does not require perfection. It requires honesty. Ask yourself hard questions. When was the last time your faith stretched you? When was the last time you obeyed despite discomfort? When was the last time you pursued God without needing a crisis to motivate you? Reflection is uncomfortable, but comfort is what created the drift in the first place. There is something powerful about remembering your first fire, the season when faith felt alive, when gratitude was fresh, when obedience felt urgent. That fire may not return in the same emotional form, but its depth can grow stronger than before. Mature passion is quieter, but steadier. It does not depend on constant excitement. It is sustained by conviction. Lukewarmness says, "This is enough." Growth says, "There is more." Indifference says, "I'm fine." Hunger says, "Refine me." Comfort says, "Stay safe." Devotion says, "Shape me." If any of these signs resonated with you, do not interpret that as failure. Interpret it as awareness. The worst position is not realizing you are drifting. The hopeful position is recognizing it while you still care. Because here is the truth. The fact that this message unsettles you is evidence that your heart is not cold. Cold hearts do not self-examine. Indifferent hearts do not reflect. If you feel conviction, that is life, and life can be reignited. The question is not whether you have been lukewarm at moments. The question is whether you will remain there. You do not need dramatic public declarations. You need consistent private decisions, small acts of obedience, intentional time, honest repentance where needed, focused attention. Passion is rebuilt through practice. Faith is not sustained accidentally. It is cultivated deliberately. So today, instead of asking whether you look faithful, ask whether you are growing. Instead of asking whether others approve, ask whether your heart is aligned. Instead of settling for spiritual neutrality, pursue depth. Lukewarm faith is subtle, but so is renewal. And renewal begins with a decision. If you refuse to drift, if you choose hunger over comfort, if you want your faith to burn with clarity instead of fading into routine, then this is your moment to respond. Not emotionally, intentionally. If you're choosing to examine your heart honestly, type refresh in the comments. Not as performance, but as commitment. And share this with someone who values growth over comfort. Because the most dangerous spiritual condition is not opposition. It is indifference. And indifference can be reversed, starting now.